There is a decision that married couples in this country make in their early 60s that more than any tax move, more than any Social Security claiming strategy, more than any investment choice, will determine whether they hit retirement with their full nest egg intact, or whether they hand $100,000 or more to the government, to an insurance company, or to a former employer they no longer work for. The decision is how to take a pension, and it is, by a wide margin, the single decision I see couples handle worst. About 33 million Americans still have access to some form of defined benefit pension, either through a current employer, a former employer, or a union plan. That number is smaller than it was a generation ago, but for the people inside it, the choices around how to claim the pension are the largest financial choices they will ever make outside of buying a house. And the paperwork for those choices typically arrives in the mail in a packet that's 40 or 50 pages long, with a deadline, in language that was written by an actuary and reviewed by a lawyer. I'm going to walk you through the 5 specific mistakes I see married couples make most often when that packet arrives, the dollar amounts at stake in each one, the questions to ask before you sign anything, and the one mistake that quietly costs the most money of all 5, which most people make without ever realizing they had a choice. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm a tax resolution specialist. Before I went into private practice 4 years ago, I spent 6 years inside the IRS as a revenue officer. I'm 34. Pension elections sit slightly outside the federal tax work I do day to day, but they show up in every retirement conversation I have with a couple in their late 50s or early 60s. And they're the area where I see the largest dollar amounts left on the table by people who didn't know what they were signing. Quick thing before we go any further. None of this is financial, tax, or legal advice. It's educational, full stop. I'm not your attorney, I'm not your CPA, and I'm not responsible for any decision you make off the back of this video. Pension elections are usually irrevocable once made, which means the stakes around getting them right are higher than almost any other retirement decision. For your actual situation, talk to a qualified professional who can look at your specific plan documents. A fee-only fiduciary financial advisor is the right person for this conversation. Everything I'm about to lay out comes from publicly documented pension law and the patterns I see in client conversations. Before I get to the 5 mistakes, I need to explain one thing about how pensions work, because the language in the packet that arrives in your mailbox will make no sense without it. When you retire from a job with a defined benefit pension, the plan offers you several different payment options. The default in most plans is something called a single life annuity, which pays you a monthly amount for the rest of your life and stops the day you die. The other options are joint and survivor annuities, which pay a reduced monthly amount during your lifetime, but continue paying some percentage of that amount to your spouse after your death. There are also lump sum options in many plans, where you take the entire actuarial value of your pension as a single payment and roll it into an IRA. And there are various hybrid options in between. Federal law, specifically the Retirement Equity Act of 1984, requires that if you are married and you elect anything other than a joint and survivor annuity, your spouse must consent in writing, and that consent must be notarized. That requirement exists for a reason. The law is trying to protect spouses from being left with no income after the death of the pension earner. The 5 mistakes I'm about to walk through are all things that happen even when that requirement is followed, because the requirement only forces a signature. It doesn't force understanding. Let me show you the 5. The first one is electing the single life annuity to maximize current income. This is the most common mistake, and it's the one that produces the largest dollar swings. Here's the setup. A 65-year-old man is offered a single life annuity of $3,800 a month from his pension. He is also offered a 50% joint and survivor option that would pay $3,420 a month during his lifetime and $1,710 a month to his wife after his death. He looks at the 2 numbers and thinks, "My wife and I need every dollar we can get. I'll take the higher number. We'll figure it out if something happens to me." His wife signs the consent. The single life annuity begins. 8 years later, he passes away. The pension stops the day after he dies. His wife, now 71, is left with her Social Security survivor benefit and whatever savings they had outside the pension. The $3,800 a month she had been living on for the last 8 years is gone. The difference between the 2 options, over a long survivor lifespan, can easily exceed $100,000 and often runs much higher. In this hypothetical, if the wife lives another 18 years after her husband's death, the 50% survivor option would have paid her about $369,000 during her widowhood. The single life annuity pays her $0. The $380 a month they gained during his lifetime adds up to about $36,500 over those 8 years. The math is brutal. The question to ask is not which option pays more right now. The question is, which option pays more across both lifetimes, weighted by realistic life expectancy? For most married couples, the joint and survivor option produces a better total outcome unless there are very specific reasons to do otherwise. Those reasons exist, and I'll get to them in mistake number 2. But the default reflex of take the higher current number is wrong more often than it's right. The second one is electing pension max without the right life insurance backing it up. This one is the flip side of mistake number 1, and it gets made by couples who have done some research and learned about a strategy called pension maximization. Pension maximization works like this. You elect the single life annuity to get the highest possible monthly payment. You take the difference between that payment and the joint survivor payment, and you use it to buy a life insurance policy on the pension earner's life, with the spouse as beneficiary. When the pension earner dies, the pension stops, but the life insurance pays out and replaces the lost income. The strategy can work. It can also fail catastrophically, and I've seen it fail far more often than it succeeds for couples who execute it without the right safeguards. Here's what goes wrong. The life insurance has to be permanent, not term, because term insurance expires and the pension earner could outlive the policy. Permanent life insurance is expensive. The premium is calculated based on the pension earner's age and health at the time the policy is issued. If the pension earner is 65 with any health issues, the premium can easily exceed the additional monthly amount from the single life annuity. The math stops working before it starts. Even when the math works on paper, the policy has to be maintained for the rest of the pension earner's life. If a premium is missed, if the policy lapses, if the cash value gets borrowed against and the policy implodes, the spouse loses the safety net and the original pension election is irrevocable. The pension can't be put back into joint and survivor form because the pension earner died. Pension maximization is a legitimate strategy in specific cases. The pension earner has to be young enough and healthy enough to get affordable, permanent coverage. The couple has to have the discipline and the cash flow to maintain the premium for decades. And the policy has to be sized large enough to actually replace the survivor benefit, not just supplement it. If anyone has pitched this strategy to you and didn't walk through all 3 of those conditions in detail, get a second opinion before signing anything. The strategy is sometimes pitched by life insurance salespeople who are compensated on the policy premium. Their incentives are not necessarily aligned with your outcome. The third one is taking the lump sum and rolling it without understanding the long-term cost. A lot of pension plans now offer a lump sum buyout option as an alternative to the monthly annuity. The plan calculates the actuarial present value of your pension and offers you that amount as a one-time payment, which you can roll into an IRA. The pitch is appealing. You get control of the money. You're not dependent on the plan staying solvent. You can leave the balance to your heirs if you die early. The investments can potentially grow faster than the pension's implicit return. And many plans actively encourage the lump sum because it gets the liability off their books. Here's what the pitch leaves out. The actuarial present value calculation is run using interest rate assumptions that, in most years, undervalue the monthly annuity option. When interest rates are low, the lump sum looks small relative to what the annuity is actually worth over a normal lifespan. When interest rates are high, the lump sum looks larger, but the discount rate being applied to the annuity is also higher. The deeper issue is that a lump sum transfers all of the longevity risk and all of the investment risk from the pension plan to you. The pension was designed to pay you a fixed amount for life, regardless of how long you live or what the market does. The lump sum is a fixed amount that has to last however long you live, invested in whatever you choose, and managed through whatever market conditions arrive. For a single person with limited heirs and a desire for control, the lump sum can make sense. For a married couple who values predictable monthly income and doesn't want to manage a large investment portfolio in their 70s and 80s, the joint and survivor annuity often produces a better outcome even though it's less flexible. There's also a tax angle most people miss. The lump sum rolled into an IRA becomes subject to required minimum distributions starting at age 73 or 75, depending on when you were born. Those mandatory withdrawals can push couples into higher tax brackets and trigger Medicare premium surcharges through the IRMA system I've covered in another video. The monthly annuity pays out at a steady rate that's much easier to plan around for tax purposes. The fourth one is failing to coordinate the pension with Social Security claiming. This is where 2 retirement decisions that interact with each other get made in isolation. Most couples make the pension election when they retire, and then separately decide when to claim Social Security. The 2 decisions are treated as independent. They are not independent. Social Security claiming has its own optimization. Filing at 62 gives you a permanently reduced benefit. Filing at full retirement age, which is 67 for most people retiring now, gives you the unreduced benefit. Delaying until 70 increases your benefit by 8% per year between full retirement age and 70. For a married couple, the higher earner's claiming decision affects not only their own benefit, but also the survivor benefit the lower earner will receive after the higher earner's death. The interaction with the pension matters because the pension provides income that can fund a Social Security delay strategy. If the pension is large enough to cover the couple's expenses from age 65 to 70, delaying Social Security to 70 produces a permanently higher benefit for both spouses and a much larger survivor benefit. If the pension is taken as a single life annuity and stops at the pension earner's death, that creates a need for income that can pressure couples into claiming Social Security earlier than is optimal. The joint and survivor annuity election, combined with delayed Social Security claiming, often produces the best combined outcome for married couples. The single life annuity, combined with early Social Security claiming, often produces the worst. The two decisions need to be modeled together, not separately. The fifth one is the one almost nobody talks about, and it's the one that quietly costs the most money of all five for couples who make it. It's the failure to check whether a former employer owes you a pension you forgot about. Here's what happens. Someone works at a company in their 20s or 30s for 5 or 10 years. The company has a defined benefit pension plan. Vesting occurs after 5 years, which means the person has a permanent right to a pension from that plan, even after they leave the company. They leave the company, they take their next job, 20 or 30 years go by, they retire from a different employer entirely. The original pension is still owed to them. The original company may have been bought, sold, merged, spun off, or gone bankrupt in the intervening decades. The pension plan may have been transferred to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is the federal agency that insures pension plans. The records may have been split across multiple successor entities. The person has no idea they have money waiting for them somewhere. The Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation maintains a database of unclaimed pensions. It's free to search. You enter your name, your date of birth, and the names of any former employers you can remember, and the database tells you whether there's a pension benefit owed to you. As of recent reporting, the PBGC was holding more than $450 million in unclaimed pension benefits owed to specific individuals who had not yet come forward to claim them. I had a client come in last year, call her Pauline, 67, retired nurse. She was reviewing her retirement income sources for tax planning purposes. We went through her work history. She mentioned almost in passing that she had worked for a hospital chain in her early 30s for about 7 years before changing jobs. The hospital chain had been acquired by a larger health system in the late 1990s. She hadn't thought about it in decades. We searched the PBGC database. The hospital chain's pension plan had been terminated in 2003 and turned over to PBGC. Pauline had a vested benefit. She had never claimed it. We filed the paperwork. The PBGC began paying her about $480 a month for life, plus a lump sum for the back payments that should have started when she turned 65. The 2-year back payment came to about $11,500. The reason this is the worst known of the 5 is that you have to know to look. The PBGC isn't going to find you. The employer doesn't have to find you. The pension industry's record keeping across company name changes, mergers, and acquisitions is genuinely poor, and the burden of locating an old benefit falls entirely on the worker. If you have ever worked anywhere for 5 or more years, even decades ago, even at a company that doesn't exist anymore, search the PBGC database. The website is pbgc.gov. It costs nothing. It takes 10 minutes, and it has the potential to surface a pension benefit you forgot you had. Here's what to do this week. 5 things. First, if you have a pension election coming up in the next 12 months, do not sign anything until you've had the joint and survivor versus single life math run by a fee-only fiduciary advisor, not the company's HR department, not the pension plan's customer service line, an advisor whose compensation is not affected by the choice you make. Second, if you've already made a pension election and you took the single life annuity to maximize current income, look at whether your plan allows for any re-election windows. Most do not, but a few plans have specific provisions for re-election after a qualifying event. If you're inside one of those windows, the option may still be available. Third, if anyone has pitched you a pension maximization strategy involving life insurance, get a second opinion from someone who is not compensated on the insurance premium. The strategy works for some couples. It fails for many others. The failure mode is invisible until the policy lapses or the pension earner dies. Fourth, model your pension election and your Social Security claiming decision together. The two decisions interact. The best combined outcome usually involves the joint and survivor annuity paired with delayed Social Security claiming for the higher earner. But every couple's situation is different, and the math has to be run on your specific numbers. Fifth, search the PBGC database at pbgc.gov for any former employers you've ever worked for, going back as far as you can remember. Include companies that no longer exist. Include companies that were acquired or merged. The database is free, the search takes 10 minutes, and the money is real. The reason this video exists is that pension elections are one of the few areas in retirement planning where the decision is genuinely irrevocable. You can change your mind about Social Security claiming within a limited window. You can adjust your IRA withdrawals year over year. You can sell investments and buy different ones. You cannot unsign a pension election once the paperwork has been processed and the first payment has been made. The stakes are too high for the decision to be made on the basis of which number on the page looks bigger. If you've spent 30 or 40 years earning a pension, you've earned the right to make that election with full information, with proper modeling, and with a qualified advisor walking you through the trade-offs. If this video was useful, share it with someone in your life who has a pension coming up for election, or who has ever worked for an employer with a defined benefit plan. The people who most need this information are the ones least likely to come looking. I'll see you in the next one.